Hey everyone, and welcome to the Perfect Bite podcast, your fusion of food and entrepreneurship. You'll hear stories from chefs, restaurateurs, CPG brands, and more from the food and bev industry. All of them are at different points in their journeys, talking about their experiences and how they've cooked up something new. Let's dig in.
Welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. Today's conversation pairs an incredibly important subject with something we all love and need: food. We know the healing powers of food, both physically and emotionally. This is especially true at Freedom a la carte, a local Columbus café, catering business, and nonprofit supporting survivors of human trafficking through workforce development programming, giving them a chance to stand on their own 2 feet with respect and dignity. I'm honored to speak with today's guest about how she and her team are growing freedom in Central Ohio and beyond. Please welcome CEO of Freedom a la carte, Paula Haines. Hi, Paula.
Hi,
Oh,
good morning.
good morning. I'm so happy that this is how I get to start my week, is seeing your beautiful smiling face and talking about something that is just so important, and the work that you and the team are doing. It's heartwarming.
Well, thank you. That's so kind. I feel the same way. That's a great way to start the week and get in the frame of mind of why we do what we do. Because sometimes it's easy to just get in the daily grind. So this is a gift to me as well.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, it's really special when you get to speak about something that you're doing in and out all day. And this is what I always wanted this podcast to be, is to show the behind the scenes for business owners and entrepreneurs and food and bev, so that people can say, oh, this is really what's going on. And Freedom is just so unique in its mission and how you all approach things. So I can't wait for us to talk more about it.
Awesome.
Well, I always love to take things back a little bit here. Can you tell
Okay.
us, when you first fell in love with food, what were your favorite foods as a kid growing up?
Well, I think I fell in love with food around my grandparents. Both of my grandmothers were really excellent cooks in very different styles. My one grandmother lived in Columbus on the west side, and we would go to her house almost every Sunday for Sunday dinner, and she would make homemade noodles and mashed potatoes and green beans and just this feast of food.
Mm.
And in my adult life, recreating that food is such a therapeutic experience, right? You just are connected back in time. Just the smell of those noodles and chicken.
Mm.
And then my grandma Boston was Polish and lived in Western Ohio or Eastern Ohio near Steubenville and Martin Sperry. And she was a baker.
Mm.
She taught me how to bake pie crust from scratch and bake holiday cookies. She worked full time, but she would have all of her shopping done by Thanksgiving, and then she would bake cookies until Christmas. And so she would come at Christmas with boxes and boxes and boxes of all these really elegant looking and delicious cookies. And so I've again tried to pick up the baton and carry on some of that tradition as well. So that's my basic connection to food. My other food story, the food that I loved as a kid is French fries. I still love French fries.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember driving to the fast food restaurant in our small town with my dad. Whenever we would order food, I would always want to go with my dad to pick it up. And when we picked it up, we would always order an extra order of fries that he and I would eat on the way home.
I love
And that
that.
was kind of our little secret.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we just had our own little secret stash of fries. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It is important to have the secret stash of fries sometimes. The ones that you get from the bottom of the bag, like,
Yeah, oh, those are the bonus. Yes, you feel like such a reward when you have those at the bottom.
oh, that's wonderful. I love how you had a little mix of the Midwest, classic foods, and then again, some amazing baking, which you're around today, every day.
Yes, I am. Now, they don't really welcome my input in the kitchen. It's not my area of expertise, but I am connected with it.
Yeah.
I do love it. And Yeah.
That's so special.
Love being a part of it.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And now you get to pass it on to your next generations in the family, which is so special.
Exactly. Yes. In different ways.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more about your career journey before Freedom a la carte. It's very interesting. You weren't someone who was just in food and bev. And tell us a little bit
No.
about how the change came about.
Yes, I actually started as a volunteer. So my career was in pharmaceutical sales for a while. My husband and I had several businesses. I ran a skincare distribution, you know, for a while. We were the US distributor for a Canadian-based skincare line. And we did that for a while with lots of interesting little stories behind it, and where just like Ryan Seacrest was interested in maybe partnering with us. So we had a few meetings with his people in New York and met with him out in California, and just like interesting things
Yeah.
happened with that. And then I started a marketing business, which was what I was educated in and just tend to be gifted in, and did that for about 10 years before I discovered Freedom a la carte and started volunteering.
Mm.
I attended like a human trafficking 101 course. They called it Abolition University. And I had heard about human trafficking, but didn't really understand exactly
Right.
what it was. I kind of had my own preconceived ideas. And when I realized it was women in our community, a lot happening on the west side of Columbus, which is where I was visiting my grandma every Sunday.
Wow.
And my mother grew up, and my husband's from that area. And that these were girls and young women who were very vulnerable, a lot of them abused as children, neglected, sexually assaulted, and looking for someone to take care of them, and someone comes along and tells them what they want to hear and need to hear. And then, all of a sudden that message and that relationship changes to one of coercion and force into the commercial sex industry. And
Wow.
so just understanding that was the path of many of these women was humbling. And I honestly could relate to myself as a young girl and reflect on moments in time when I was very, very vulnerable and thinking, that could have been me.
Yeah.
By the grace of God, I didn't have that exact experience, but I really felt connected to it. And the thought that these women who had prostituted and sold themselves by force and carried shame for that and were shunned by society was appalling. And I just wanted to help lift them up and show them how worthy they are and that this is not the end of their story. And so I loved that. I had this business background. And so the social enterprise design was really interesting to me, that a nonprofit would operate a business to help support the revenue for operating the services that they provide. I thought that was
Yeah.
brilliant. And, I love food and loved giving a woman a job so that she can then take care of herself. Let's equip each other and help us. So that was my story of how I got started volunteering, and then actually saw that they needed some funds. I was working closely with the team and some of their marketing as well as volunteering in the kitchen. And one of the women I was working closely with had to get another job because she was getting divorced and she wasn't paid enough and wasn't offered benefits. And I said, okay, this should not be
Right.
how we operate. And so we started Eat Up Columbus. We just pulled people together and chefs in the area, and we started this fundraising annual event that is just an incredible thing that the community has come out and support. And then I was on the board, and we were trying to find the next leader. And in 2016, I said, why don't I step off the board and be the interim director? And within 30 days, my husband said, honey, you should just do this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I needed that affirmation that I could do it, and also permission to take that risk for our family. And so I jumped on in, and here I am 9 years later.
I can't believe it. It's been almost a decade. I love that
Yeah.
you do bring an entrepreneurial background to this, even though you didn't technically start Freedom. Do you know what year
Yes.
it was founded?
Yes. So the organization started under the name DOMA International in 2008,
Got it.
and then partnered with Catch Court to really start serving survivors locally in 2009, and then realized that the women they were serving couldn't get a job.
Yeah.
I mean, with the criminal record, even, 15 years ago, people would not hire you. And so that's why the founder said, we need to start a business where we can employ these women. And that's how Freedom a la carte, the social enterprise, started.
Amazing. And do you know how food got associated in the beginning?
So it was really the founders, they were familiar with food. They had worked in a restaurant or had parents who had restaurants. It was something very familiar to them. And so they had looked at other models. They actually went to a place called Thistle Farm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Mm.
And at the time, Thistle Farm was doing candles and lotions. And so they looked at that model. And on the way home, we're like, this is great. We want to do this, but candles, lotions doesn't feel like something we connect with. And so that's where they came up with the food idea. And what I've loved is from the beginning, they've really set the standard that this is not just an ordinary food experience. They wanted to make the flavors bold and unique and interesting. And I loved that they set that precedent from the get-go.
Absolutely. And it's so fresh. So when you even step into the
Mhm.
Freedom a la carte cafe, right as you enter downtown Columbus, it's just bright and airy. And again, very, very fresh food, very fresh ingredients, even in the lattes that you make. I love that Spring Street one that you've got going right now with the
Oh,
strawberry. There's thyme. It's very sophisticated. This isn't just, thrown together. There's a lot of thought that's been put behind every item on the menu.
yeah, everything's made from scratch. So our syrups are made from scratch. All of our dressings and sauces that we put on sandwiches, everything is, like you said, fresh, and we make it from scratch. So that, I think, not only gives the customer a good experience, but helps the staff preparing the food to really establish confidence and pride behind what they're
Yeah.
doing and delivering, because they've done it all. Like, it's all us. So it's really, really special.
Oh, that is so cool. Do you have any, say, farms or specific local, vendors that you work with for the ingredients?
We kind of spread the love around, but we have over the years, and it's grown. And now that our volume is higher, it's not as logistically feasible for us to partner with smaller farms because of the demand of product.
Oh.
But back in the day, when I was volunteering, we would get donations from farms. And I remember they got a donation of lettuce, and it came in great big garbage bags. And myself and Diane Williams and Gay Armentrout, who are also still volunteering to this day, we all took some home, and you had to wash it out, and lettuce is hard to
Yeah.
wash. I mean, it gets so gritty, and then you have to dry it.
Yep.
And so, like, we tell stories of how we all had lettuce all over our houses trying to dry the lettuce out.
That was early days. That was back then.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We're good now. But that is true. Like, that is still the grit that I love seeing in early stage and small businesses is there's a lot of physical work that you have to do more than you think. And there's, again, the moments where you're at home doing something. Again, I'm someone who's had like millions of packages in my house and boxes, and you're like, this is the warehouse.
Yes. It's what you
Yeah.
do, whatever it takes, right? You have to have that mentality.
Absolutely. And now,
Exactly.
again, you've grown the business and the enterprise so much so that, again, you've got the proper facilities for everything. But
Yes, and they don't let me in the kitchen too much, so you can understand why now that I told you that story.
I mean, everyone needs an official taste tester. So I hope you're just
Yes,
popping in
and
to
I'm
be
good at
like,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
that would be my job. I'd be like, what are we making today? So, how are you reaching folks who would be a good fit for the programming and the workforce development offerings that you have here? Do people feel comfortable approaching you all at this point, knowing what
Mhm.
Freedom a la carte is? You're almost 20 years established in this community. Essentially, walk us through the journey of how someone gets started and then the different types of offerings they can work with you all.
So, like I briefly mentioned, we started in partnership with Catch Court. So, Catch Court is a specialty docket in Franklin County, specifically for those who've experienced human trafficking. And it's a 2-year probationary program. So, someone opts into the program, they are released from jail, but they have to go to treatment, adhere to that program, and then attend catch court programming once a week. And we provide lunch each week for the programming. We provide peer support and mentoring. And for a long time, that is how we had referrals to our workforce development program was from catch court. And over the years, Catch has grown and people have graduated. And another program that we then added was what we call the butterfly program. Another thing I love about Freedom a la carte is how it's grown very organically over the years by really building relationships with survivors and understanding their needs and listening to their needs and seeing where there was gaps in
Yeah.
service. And another one of those gaps, in addition to not being able to get a job and then starting the social enterprise, we saw that women were graduating these amazing programs and then relapsing or really having some struggles of life. The trauma is so complex and severe, and the barriers are so numerous. You don't overcome that in 2 years or 3 years. It really takes a lifetime. And so the butterfly program is that lifelong support. Uh, we have peer support groups. We do social outings. So that connection is such an important part of trauma recovery as well as substance use disorder recovery. And so that's a big part of what we do. But we also offer what others call case management. We call it resource management because we like to connect people with
Mhm.
resources. And that happens throughout your lifetime. Like things come up
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you've lost your job and you're having trouble paying your rent. Who do you turn to? Well, these women know they can turn to us and we're going to help connect them to the right resources, or we might be able to help them with that rent for a few months until they get back on their feet. So that's part of that program. And with that, we served 357 women last year. And so as that
Holy
program
cow.
grows, yes, as that program grows, that is really becoming the referral source for that program itself, but also like our workforce development program. And as people are graduating from our workforce development program, a lot of women have such a heart to serve others as they have been served in their recovery. And so we find a lot of women working at recovery places or in nonprofits. And what's happening is as they're in those roles, they're meeting women and sharing their story, finding out others might have a similar story of being trafficked and maybe not quite having identified prior to being that victim and refer them to our program. And so right now, the biggest source of referral for us is that peer referrals, that peer saying, hey, this is a great program to join.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah,
So, really a network effect happening here.
absolutely. And then last year, we expanded our housing program. So we've known that housing is an important element when we're moving someone towards self-sufficiency. So at the root of what we are doing at Freedom a la carte is really helping survivors to become self-sufficient. And so with that, obviously jobs and housing are at the foundation. And we all know that the housing crisis and how difficult that is.
Yeah.
And a lot of women we work with are, in a job that's paid hourly wage, and you get sick, maybe have COVID, or your kids have COVID and they
Right.
need to be home. Missing, 4 or 5 days of work can affect your ability to pay your bills at the end of the month. And so again, that's a place where a time when individuals can come to us and say, "God, I'm doing great. I just had this little hiccup and I need help with having trouble paying my utility bill." And we can step in and pay that bill and just keep them on that path of self-sufficiency. Well, we also have been trying to help solve the low income housing and affordable housing demands and needs of our clients.
Right.
And so this past year, we launched what we call Hands Up Housing. And it's a pilot program really aimed at that bridge. Wow, individuals are on subsidized housing and then they go off of it. So let me tell you a story of someone who was in our program. At the same time, she was in a recovery program, and they provide housing. But as part of that provision of housing, you're on housing voucher.
Mm.
So she's on this housing voucher, doesn't have to pay for her housing, but she gets a job, actually is going to school. And when that time comes for her to renew her housing voucher, she's told she doesn't qualify anymore because she makes too much money.
Oh gosh.
This is a very common story. So you go from paying zero in rent to at least $1,200, right, for a 2-bedroom apartment. And that is overwhelming. That's something you weren't planning for. No one's prepared you for this. And quite honestly, some people might say, why am I working? Like the numbers aren't working. So our Hands Up Housing program is designed to help bridge that gap. So when someone is making that transition, we can first off help them find affordable housing resources through some partnerships we've developed with landlords. But at the same time, uh, provide 12 months of rental assistance. So the first 3 months, we offer 60% that we would pay of their rent. And then 6 months of we pay 40%. And then the last 3 months, we pay 20%. And each month, they are meeting with someone to review their budget to make sure that their budget and spending habits are reviewed and talked about, and so that they're building that budget muscle. And at the end of those 12 months, they should be really confident in how they're paying their rent, what they need to pay their rent, and how to manage those finances. So that is something we're excited about and hoping to expand by the end of the year into our butterfly community as well.
That's just incredible because, like you said, it's this very smart way of looking at like weaning off the support. Again, you're not just
Yes.
cutting it off when they hit X quota or something. And it's much more tailored to their situation. I mean, I'd love it if everyone went through a budgeting workshop every month
Yes.
because, like you said, the housing crisis is real. And you and I sit in a position of privilege, and I still feel it sometimes where it's like, wow, my partner and I moved from Chicago to Columbus, and the pricing is not that different these days. I'll tell you
Wow.
that. Columbus is growing very quickly. So you're figuring out, how do I budget rent versus everything else? And it's the percentage of mortgage and rent that folks pay these days compared to what we're bringing in is very different than it used to be.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is. And we've been fortunate to partner with Jewish Family Services. It provide individual one-on-one financial coaching. And so instead of us doing that internally, we will now be able to partner with them. So someone else is diving into that really personal and sometimes feel
Yeah.
invasive part of your life. And so I'm excited to have that partnership and work together on that.
That is
So
so great. And it sounds like every bit along the way with the workforce programming, with the butterfly programming, with now the housing programming that you're providing, you're doing it with a lot of care because, as you said, this is a person who's gone through one of the most horrific things that a person could do to another human being. And that makes me very emotional to even think about that and to talk about this. And I think it's so important that we talk about this. This is not an issue that I think a lot of people realize is happening right under their noses. That you're passing folks on the street who have either experienced this or are experiencing this in the moment. And that there might be a lot of stigma and stereotypes of who this person could be.
And it's not just individuals that you see walking on the streets. So much of it now with online access is happening online and then behind closed doors. There's so much happening on college campuses to coerce young girls into this commercial sex lifestyle. And we just we've got to talk about it, and we've got to make some changes, and we need to hold people accountable who can continue down this path. It's happened in our society for hundreds of years, and it's time to stop.
Yeah. And like you said, this is forced. This is not someone choosing, sex work. And I think that difference is very important too.
Well, I think the distinction there is that when we think of force and coercion, we often think of like physical force, and you think of people in handcuffs and chains and being thrown into a van. And what's happening is it's more manipulative coercion where someone is kind of removed from their support system. Rather, that's voluntary. In many cases, it could be a runaway or just somebody leaving a bad home life and out there, and someone stepping in and providing their needs, providing food and shelter. And a lot of times the relationship that you've been missing, right? But then the manipulation and coercion starts where kind of the switch goes from this relationship that's very positive to something that's very quickly negative, and you are manipulated into the sex work in order to have food, have a place to stay, have that relationship that with somebody who you think you love, or, to have drugs that either you already are addicted to or that becomes kind of your coping mechanism to get you through your day to day. So when we say force, I just wanted to make that clarity that what force really looks like.
Yeah, it's mental. It's the grooming.
It's mental, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gosh. What would you say are some of your biggest challenges you've had building the brand, the business, and the nonprofit component? Because this is a very unique setup, like you've said, with the social enterprise model. And how do you make a really clear message about what you all are doing in Columbus and beyond, knowing that, yes, you've got this gorgeous, cute cafe you can walk into and you have a coffee meeting, but you are pairing it with a very important and difficult topic?
Yeah, I think that's something I'm not sure we still have quite right. We're continuing to always try to improve in that area. But I think one challenge to overcome for us has been the negative stigma that seems to center around a nonprofit entering the business world. You think immediately people think of quality expectations of being lower.
Right.
And so with that struggle, we've tried to almost do the reverse and lead with the business being top of the line products, fresh ingredients made from scratch. Like you said, when you enter the cafe, it doesn't feel like a nonprofit. It feels like any other cafe in Columbus, hopefully. And we had some intention, behind that. And so we always say the food in the service and the experience must be top notch. And then the mission is the cherry on top. Like oh, the food's delicious. The service was amazing. This is a beautiful space. And it's supporting a mission to help women who've been experienced human trafficking. Like, this is,
Wow.
I'll be back.
Yeah.
That's how you get people to come back. I always say that first purchase is the charity purchase of, oh, aren't they cute? They're operating a business. And then, we want to wow them and say, no, we're not just a nonprofit operating a business. We're a business and we provide services to help women. So that's our cherry on top approach, I call it.
I think that's so
Um,
smart because, yeah, it's one of the best cafes in Columbus. And that's saying something. Columbus has incredible pastries, coffee shops. Like the bar is very high here. And I was so excited to learn that when I moved here last year. It was like, wow, look at all these choices. And they're very, very good choices. So I appreciate the cherry on top approach for someone who might not be, you know, thinking that way specifically when they're going out for a meal or a coffee, but I like to think that we're seeing in younger generations too, they are voting with their wallets a lot more. And they're saying,
mhm.
I'm going to specifically choose businesses that align with my social values and morals. So I think it's all moving in the right direction.
It is. And again, it's something that you know, we've tried things and then had to pivot. So we do a message inside each of our box lunches for catering. And we've done that over the years. But in the cafe, we've had people come in and say they can come in and leave and not even understand it's a mission, which can happen as well. And so trying to find that balance of making sure we're getting the message out. I mean, human trafficking is a heavy topic.
Yeah.
Not everybody coming in to buy coffee wants to hear a message about human trafficking. And so trying to figure out how to balance that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something else that we have struggled with, and that is trying to be an empathetic and compassionate place of business and leadership style while also holding people accountable. Because sometimes when you try to hold someone accountable, it feels like you're not being passionate because you do understand their situation. So this is something that I think that we've been challenged with over the years because we do care about our employees. We want to give everyone a chance and a second and third and fourth chance. But sometimes there needs to be a separation before that third or fourth chance happens. Somebody might need to just take a break and work on themselves or work somewhere else and get a different perspective before they're ready to move forward. So
Yeah.
it's trying to balance that is really, really difficult.
I wish you saw that in more kitchens. I mean, of course, we've heard of certain styles and sometimes horror stories of when you're held accountable or if you do something wrong, you get screamed at or, thrown out. And so, again, this is a situation, especially you cannot have someone feel traumatized in that moment. But like you said, you're like in this place of, well, we have to teach responsibility and this next level of, if you're going to be the next level of yourself, you got to have some constructive criticism involved as well.
Yes.
That's a balance.
Yeah.
Gosh.
It's tough. And, women are coming in with trauma and they've been talked to and spoken in a certain manner. And so when they bring that experience into the kitchen and start acting in that way, that can be triggering to others. And so how to handle that in a way that is keeping a safe environment, but recognizing the growth and that everyone's coming in kind of in a different place on their recovery journey. So, yeah.
I'm just so grateful you all are doing that. I know many others are grateful you're doing it. And I want to talk about some statistics here. Now, you recently completed this very intensive research with Stanford and not only looking again at the statistics of folks who are affected by human trafficking, specifically within central Ohio, the numbers are huge, which if you then think of large cities, you must think, oh my goodness, like what's going on here, but also the incredible impact you all are having on the community. So tell us a few of those moments, because if I was an investor, a venture capitalist for, say, a tech business, these are numbers beyond compare.
Yes. So let me tell you how this happened,
Yeah.
because, I talked about how we've grown organically. And I feel like a lot of the things that have happened with us in our journey of freedom have been organic as well. And this is one of those examples. And I was presenting to a group about freedom and doing a presentation and talked about our impact, which is impressive.
Yeah.
So we follow those in our workforce development program for 5 years, and we look and see how many return to prison, because that's a big indication of obviously not being successful in the ideals of self-sufficiency. And so pretty consistently around the 80%, but last year, 84% of those that have been in our workforce development for the past 5 years and not picked up any criminal charges.
Wow.
Now, the national average for someone in prostitution is actually that 80% do return to prison. And we know that as well because a lot of the women have been in and out of prison multiple times. And so um, using that status as one, also that worked with 357 survivors last year. We're on track to hit probably over 500 this year. And, 70% of those are receiving assistance to be in stable housing. And just these kinds of statistics are what we kind of consistently see every year. So in that presentation, I list whatever those are. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, Paula, the work you're doing is amazing. Thank you so much. Have you ever calculated what the return on investment is for someone?
Right.
And I said, no, I haven't. I wouldn't know how to go about doing that. And he said, well, I lead an alumni consulting team of Stanford Business School graduates, and we would love to help you figure that out. And so I thought, wow, that's amazing. And so 3 or 4 months down the road, I pull out his card and send him an email and say, I don't know if you remembered me, but you offered these services. And so he was so kind and got a team of about 7 individuals together, very diverse, some a few years of MBA school, others at the end of their career, just in retirement, everything in between, from all over the country. And they looked at the outcomes that we had measured, social outcomes, and then they went to work putting dollars behind that. How does this affect the community? And what they calculated was a 7-to-1 return on investment. And that includes the social enterprise. So with each cup of coffee that you buy, that's a 7-to-1 return on investment for the community. And
Unheard of.
that looked crazy,
Yeah.
right?
I'm still in
And
shock because it's like, in tech, it's like, oh, 3-to-1 would be incredible for folks to hit.
yeah,
7-to-1.
7-to-1. And they're looking at the savings for people not returning to jail. They're looking at the benefit of people getting off of SNAP benefits and TANF benefits, their food assistance and other government assistance programs like housing,
I
right? We're helping them get off of that housing. And then looking at the economic impact of people getting back in the workforce, and then our social enterprise economic value to the community. And all of those, lots and lots of calculations in there, give us that return on investment calculation, as well as $21.6 million annually for the Columbus community.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So isn't that so? Think of how valuable that is to me when I go talk to state legislators and funders about how I would love money to expand this model. And here's some information to support that. I had one state representative say, this is a no-brainer. Like, why aren't you asking for more money?
And you're like, that's again like one
Please.
of those
Yeah,
dream
I'll be back
situations
next
where
year.
you're like, well, we've worked hard for this and finally people are seeing it. And
Yes.
I think sadly it takes dollars for folks to say, yeah, I'll invest in it.
Yes.
But it's really important dollars in this case.
It's really important. And what we're seeing and what we've seen is that this space where we specialize in the journey for a survivor is really unique. There are other organizations around the country kind of working on educating people in the prevention category, right? And the intervention category with law enforcement and people trying to get individuals out of the light, hold people accountable, et cetera. Then we have
Yeah.
short-term programs like the specialty dockets, the treatment facilities, and homes and programs specifically for human trafficking survivors. But again, those programs have a start date and an end date. And so where we specialize is beyond that, right? Workforce development, stabilized housing, independent housing, and that connection and community for long-term support. And we're not seeing that that's available in other
Mhm.
markets. So when we talk about what we do, other cities say, we need you here. We need you here.
Yeah.
So that has been our goal now is how do we expand this model and see it succeed in a new location, in a new city. And that's what the funding ask has been this past year is to replicate this within Ohio.
My goodness. And I can't wait for it to happen soon. So it sounds like it's been very positive support in terms of local and state government when you've presented the idea.
Yes. Now, people love the concept. People want to help. Budgets right now, it's a crazy world. Lots of
Yes.
uncertainty,
Gosh. Yeah.
especially when it comes to government
Yeah.
funding, and which then carries over to private funders because so many are losing government funding or uncertain in their government funding that private funders are
Yeah.
being asked to step in and fill the gaps. And so expansion is not really what people want to support right now. So we're waiting for the timing to be just right. That it needs to be right for all of us. So we're waiting for see where everything lands.
Right. Right. Where the dice go these days, because
Yes.
that was one of my biggest questions for you was like, how are you approaching the challenges? What's happening in the climate? I mean, again, not only from a nonprofit perspective and so much funding getting cut, but again, there are a lot of policies and a lot of things happening right now that specifically are targeting food and bev, agriculture, hospitality in large numbers. So, what's your piece of advice for anyone who's also going through this right now to just put the armor on and keep going?
Yeah. So one thing I think that's been to our favor is our model.
Yeah.
So our social enterprise generates 57% of our total revenue.
Wow.
So that message that helps us to be sustainable. So when we lose a grant, whether it's from the government or a private funder, it's not as scary for us. We feel a little more confident and be able to replace that money with another. So just being diverse in our revenue streams, I think this is the time to diversify and telling that story, being totally transparent with where we are and what our needs are. I also think with there's so much uncertainty now and so many things that could happen that I think it's important that we look at that and consider that, take steps, speak to it at the same time, not respond emotionally to it until it happens. And that's for me, that's for my own mental health and sanity
Yeah.
is I pay attention, I'm reading, I'm trying to have a pulse of what's happening, kind of raising my hand and speaking out where I think it's appropriate, but the same time thinking until it happens and I have something to respond to, can't really respond to something that might happen. I can be thinking about it, starting to strategize, but as we all know, it's, you know, it's very ebb and flows.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I think that's good life and business lessons, right? It's just one, if you can create a solid enough foundation where you're not focusing necessarily all on other folks for growth, incredible. Because, like you said, things are going to happen that none of us can control.
yes.
And you just have to make sure you've got the backup there. And I appreciate the mental health perspective because I'm trying to keep up on everything. I'm supporting where I can. I'm talking about things where I can. And then I'm also telling myself, if I wake up in the morning and I see a subject line, I'm like, I can't read that one today. I just can't.
Yes.
I got to take a
Yeah.
second and then I can go back because that's how you get through this, is not burning out.
That's
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I would like to also talk about, as you mentioned, diverse revenue streams here. Very special event that actually brought you and I together. So, at the end
Yes.
of July 2025 here will be Eat of Columbus. As you mentioned, this is an incredible fundraising event. I've come on board as a volunteer for marketing just to help spread the word. And you have been so lucky to work with family as well on this. Past podcast guest, BJ Lieberman, has come on board to help put together a gorgeous meal with some guest chefs this year. So, how about you tell us a little bit about the event, how it's evolved, and what we're looking forward to this year?
Yes. So, as I mentioned earlier, this was something that we started back in 2014 with a group of volunteers trying to raise money for this cause that we were all passionate about. And we call it Eat Up Columbus because back in those early days, Freedom used to host underground supper clubs
Ooh.
as small fundraising events. And my husband and I actually attended one. It was at the YMCA. And you walk in, and they had, little cocktails that they would hand you. And there were maybe 20 of us all together at a big long table. And so you would be sitting down with people you didn't know, enjoying a meal served by Freedom, and then leaving as friends, all united over this passion for this organization, but finding other commonalities throughout the evening. And so we thought, how can we take this event idea and scale
Yeah.
it so that we can use it as an annual fundraiser? We had partnered with some chefs. The original idea was to do a chef competition
Mm,
when competition shows were really
yeah.
popular. And this local chef said, why don't we collaborate? Chefs are always competing, collaboration, and that fits more in line with who we are as an organization. So it was very much collaboration in itself of coming together with different ideas to form. And then it actually did reflect back on those eat up supper clubs from the earlier days. And so we did that until 2020. And then during COVID, our event had to go virtual. And then from there, the restaurant and chefs were always so generous to us. It didn't feel right to ask them at that time when restaurants were just struggling to keep doors open and get customers in to support our event. And so we took a pivot and did some outdoor dining experiences, not as focused on food, but more on the people. And we did that around the city for a few years. And now this year, we're returning back to that original sit down dinner format with BJ leading the team. Again, kind of coming to my rescue as he has a history of doing for me over the years. And so he's assembled just an amazing team of chefs from around Ohio, and I think they have really personalized it this year. And this was something the chefs came up with, was how can we make each course connected to a survivor, right? So they asked the survivors in our program about their food memories and what foods they remembered or enjoyed. And the chefs are using those stories as inspiration for the different courses. And it's just brilliant. Yeah. So we're actually, thanks to your amazing marketing, we are sold out of the event. So, which is incredible, more than a month ahead, we are totally sold out, but it's going to be just an exciting room filled with love and passion. And I can't wait to be there.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you again for allowing me to join just the volunteer team to help spread the word. Again, I can't believe 11 years ago it went from 20 folks to 400.
Yeah.
400
Can you
of
believe
us
it?
are going to sit down for a 5-course meal from multiple award-winning chefs. Like, wow.
Yes.
Really special evening. And again, for the most amazing cause, and each dish has that real connection to the survivors. So I can't wait for the chefs to share. This is going to be really, really cool.
And of course, we'll hear stories from survivors and understand, how it's all connected. And really, that's a time for us to share with our stakeholders what our needs are and just be transparent
Yes.
about what the year looks like and what the years ahead look like for freedom. So, yeah.
This is going to be great. Again, I can't wait to see the growth that's going to happen here too. I know you've got some special things in the works that you'll reveal as soon as they're ready. As we finish up here, I want to ask you a few questions before we get to the world's best and hardest question. What are you most proud of? How do you want to continue to grow? And what do you feel is next in the journey for freedom?
Oh, my goodness. What am I most proud of? I think the personal growth of the team. I was expecting to see the personal growth of those that we serve because that's what we're concentrated on, right? So we're really centered on how do we help people that have experienced sex trafficking grow and develop. But what I wasn't expecting is the growth and development of those around us, like myself and the whole team, just watching people grow and change, and volunteers, board members, partners, like all of us, like learning this and trying new things together. That is what I'm most proud of.
What do you see is next? How do you want to grow?
So I think I alluded to it, and that is, can we take this model that we've built in Columbus and replicate it in new markets? I think we can. And we're working really hard on doing all the preliminary work to get that done. So hopefully in the next less than 12 months, we'll be announcing where and when that might happen. And then seeing that growth across the country. We have a 10-year vision. And I honestly think it's not going to take us 10 years. So, like I said, last year we served 357, and we established a 10-year goal of reaching 2,000 survivors annually. And this year, our growth has been so phenomenal. We think we're going to hit 500 or more. And so I think getting to 2,000 might happen
Pretty soon.
sooner than we think. Yeah. But that's, like I said, this model is fairly new in this long-term support. And so I see that growing. And then also, I see us being a little more vocal for survivors in the anti-human trafficking movement, and really starting to take some leadership steps there. So I'm excited about that, getting more confidence in sharing it and taking a stand and educating people. I see more of that coming as well.
Oh, you've made me emotional a number of times throughout this podcast. I've had to keep it together. And I'm just so, again, thank you for everything you're doing and that you and the team are doing.
Well, thank you. You can't do this in silos. Yeah. It takes everybody together. And so I just feel privileged to be able to bring people together and work together because we're doing it together.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what advice would you give someone who does want to start a business or a nonprofit of their own? You've done this a couple of times now, whether it's in the food and bev space or beyond.
So I think that if you're going to start something new, it needs to be rooted in passion. Starting something from scratch is not easy. And passion is what will take you through the hard and difficult times. Like you said, you've got boxes piled up around your house. You've got lettuce spread out across your living room. It has to start with passion. I reflect back on I mentioned briefly a skincare distribution that we had. And that business was okay, but I was not passionate about it. I honestly was embarrassed because I thought skincare was kind of superficial and I didn't really feel it. But it was an opportunity that came my way that I thought was a really great opportunity. And so I took it. And I learned a lot, which is an important part of growth too.
Yeah.
But I wasn't passionate about it. And that's where I think the passion is necessary. And then I also think you have to have a purpose. There has to be a why behind what you're doing. Like, are you filling a gap? What makes whatever you're doing unique and different? Um, there has to be something that stands behind you. And then that kind of serves as your compass to help direct your decision making. And we've learned that at Freedom over the years. Sometimes we've made decisions that have deviated from where our focus
Right.
is. And, you get it down the road and you realize, wait, we need to kind of course correct here and you get on track. But you really have to be focused on that core mission. And then I think from there, then you can start sharing it and telling the story about your why and talking to people that share that passion and understand your purpose so they can become your donors or your partners or your customers and really rally behind you. And I think that's the foundation for anything that we do new. So,
Yeah. If you don't have your own passion and purpose behind it, who else is going to believe in you? It's pretty
yeah,
obvious when you don't. So,
it's
yeah.
obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, Paula, here we are. Last question of our chat today. World's best and hardest question because it's so hard to choose just one. But as a reminder for folks, this is called the perfect bite since we do a bit of a perfect bite of the food and bev industry and its value chain here. And because all of us have our own perfect bite. Like you mentioned earlier, recipes from childhood or a special vacation you went on and just a bite that was so special and unique to you, you'll never forget it. So, Paula, what is your perfect bite?
Mm. So my perfect bite is tiramisu.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely love a good tiramisu. And it's like my husband's term of endearment to me is to bring me a tiramisu. And let me tell you, Metzi's, which is BJ's new restaurant, it is my new favorite tiramisu. It is amazing. So that when I took a bite of his tiramisu a couple weeks ago, I was like, okay, this is it. This is my new fave.
Oh, it's just so complex too and full of goodness.
Yes, and it has that coffee and cream connection that is just so lovely. The sponge cake needs to be really soaked in espresso to where it's not dry. I think that's where people, if it's a dry tiramisu, I'm not in for it.
Yep.
But yeah, I grew up, back in the 80s with my dad making coffee ice cream in the backyard when the old fashioned coffee makers. And so I've always had this love for that coffee flavor and things. And so I think that leads to my tiramisu.
Oh, it all comes together. And it feels like a nice metaphor for everything you're doing with freedom is there's so many layers to it. And when it comes together, it's the perfect bite.
Bite.
Well, Paula, this has been incredible. Can you let folks know where they can find you? So, the Freedom a la carte location, website, as well as social accounts.
The Freedom a la carte website is freedomalacarte.org. So Freedom a la carte is spelled Freedom, ALACART.org. There is no E on the end of cart because it started as an actual food cart. So that's important to know when you're looking us up on, and then it's at Freedom a la carte for our Instagram and our LinkedIn and our Facebook as well.
Amazing. And then folks can come to the location in downtown Columbus as well as order catering through you all.
Yes. And our cafe is located at 123 East Spring Street. So that's easy to remember.
Well, Paula, thank you again so much for joining us today. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. This was Paula Haines, Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media at Perfect Bite Pod. Now go get something good to eat.